Thanks, Jackie. And then we're also going to do a quick screenshot photo here. So if you don't want to be part of that photo, again, you can opt out of that, and we'll let you know when that screenshot is done. Tejara, can you? Thank you. Okay, I think we're good. I'll be monitoring the chat box for any questions and troubleshooting if you're having any technical issues. And at this time, if everyone could put your contact info into the chat, it'll help us know who's in the room and give us all a quick way to connect with each other. And I think Tejara is going to put our diversity and design email in there just to start it off. And if you want to reach out to us that way, please feel free. And we are also going to be doing a poll here just to check in. So Jackie, if you want to start that.
Hey y'all, there are 3 questions in this poll. Feel free to answer as many or as little as you'd like. We just want to know who's in the room who we're talking with today.
And then while we're doing that, we'll be using a virtual whiteboard to take notes. So I'll be taking notes in there in the background during the discussion. We're going to share the link in case anyone feels comfortable using that. You can just grab a sticky and write some comments and your insights. And if you're more comfortable, putting questions in there, we'll be sure to see it. Tejara, do you mind sharing that link in the chat also? Thank you. Okay, so I think we're like right on time. Look at that. Tejara, if you want to kick off our panel introductions.
Yes, great, thank you. I guess let's go ahead and start with Jackie, since you initiated the poll, and maybe you can just do a quick recap as well.
Sure. Hey, everyone. It's so nice to see your names and faces here. My name is Jackie Santalucia. I'm the program director of Your Street, Your Voice, and Empower Her at ELSO. ELSO is an environmental education nonprofit local in Portland. We are Black and Brown led, women led, and ELSO stands for Exploring Life Science Outdoors, Experiencing Life Science Outdoors. And the programs that I run of Your Street, Your Voice, and Empower Her are introducing design in the built environment to ages 14 to 20, centering BIPOC, LGBTQIA youth, and using design as a tool for racial justice. I'm an architect by background and been an educator as well. So really excited to be here working with diversity in design and with Precious and Eugenie here, and really getting to talk more about creative collaboration. So, and Tejara, did you want me to do a summary of the poll too while we're here?
Sure, that would be great.
Or and I can just end it and you should be able to see it. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, you can. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Did everybody get their chance to answer? Maybe I'll keep it up for a little while, maybe until after our intros. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Sure, yeah, no problem. Okay, great. Eugenie, would you mind jumping in?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Eugenie Fontana. I am the founder of We Are Here and Gather and Garner. I am heavily involved in the creative and art community, or just in large, like the entire creative community of the Portland Metro and beyond. Let's see, what else should I say? We Are Here was started about 4 or 5 years ago. Kind of hard to remember, but it's kind of been an interesting reflection to see how long it's been around this. And it was started for the need of really unwrapping the veil of the lack of diversity in the Portland Metro. So a bunch of other folks who are in the creative community, along with myself, was the collective in starting this. So basically, We Are Here is to celebrate and collaborate with other BIPOCs and uplift folks. And in addition, we are working through, along with why we're here in this space, for partnering with the career collaborators portion and moving those pieces along in our creative community so that we have more of us in leadership positions in the spaces that we work in as creatives. And there's a lot coming, a lot of events coming soon, a lot of great, exciting projects that I'm excited to talk about at some point, but not in this conversation just yet. But
no worries. Thank you so much. Precious, would you mind sharing?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. So good to see everybody, especially all the students in the room. My name is Precious McGarren. I use she, her pronouns, and I wear lots and lots of hats. I am a faculty member at PSU in the graphic design department, where I've taught full-time and part-time since '02. In addition, I co-advise the BIPOC student group called Comma, and we're a group that amplifies BIPOC student voices as well as advocates for students within our department. I'm a creative director and designer. I do a lot of community-based work as well as nonprofit work. I'm an event facilitator. I'm highly embedded with Design Week as well. I'm on their jury, and on and on and on. But I'm really happy to see all of you.
Also, Precious's students in Comma helped us with the event graphic today, so I wanted to give a shout out there.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's a really, really great point. Catherine, did you want to share a little bit as well?
Sure. Hi, my name's Catherine Park. I'm the Director of Communications and PR at DID, and I'm also an interior designer at Hacker Architects. I first joined Diversity and Design as a volunteer about 2 years ago in 2019, and helped the group with some graphics for the Design Week Portland. And after that, I joined a few meetings and events, and I really, I was thinking that I found a perfect place to be engaged and connected to the community. And this year, I feel really grateful to be a part of the board team, and very excited to support both professionals and students in color in the design industry. Thank you, guys.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. So before we kick off our first topic of conversation, I'll just do a quick summary of the results. It looks like you guys are able to see them as well, but primarily it's looking like we have folks in the 5 to 10 year range of experience, mostly in design, architecture. So, but a good mix of other folks as well. So this is super, super great to have that array. That is the goal of diversity in design, to bring all of these creatives together. So wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here again. Okay, great. So jumping into our first topic of discussion around career support, I'll just throw out kind of an initial question, and just to the audience, feel free to jump in as well, as much as you would like to, both verbally and through the chat and through the Miro link that we put in the chat as well. We want this to be very casual conversation and really dig into some of these topics. Obviously, the panelists will kind of guide the conversation, but we definitely want you to feel that you can provide your voice and input as well. This is about engaging with the students and other professionals to dive in. So please feel free to do that. So I'll just start with a more broader picture question. What does mentorship look like in your life? And feel free to put any thoughts you have in the chat. And I think maybe Jackie or Eugenie, would you be willing to kind of dive into that a little bit? Just put me on the spot.
All right. So seat at the table. Is that right?
What a seat at the table looks like for you in your work. What does mentorship look like for you? Kind of dovetailing together. Yeah, any feedback on those points, and feel free other panelists to jump in as well, or if folks have questions, go for it.
A seat at the table, at least for me and the role I'm in. So I didn't mention, as we go along, I'll probably start mentioning things I didn't say at the beginning, but during the day, I work at an arts organization, a very large arts organization that services the greater area of the Portland region. And part of that, of being what that means for me in my life, is being a part of the conversation, being a part of being a part of a team and making it move, making efforts and initiatives move in a way where it's collective and it's not individualized. And it comes from different diverse backgrounds and experiences. So that ranges from, age. And again, age doesn't always determine that you have a set of knowledge, because, your experiences is really what determines what you bring to the table. Openness, I think, transparency, bringing your whole self to the table is how I view that, for at least my experience when I show up. So, and then mentorship, and I like to now think of it more of as a career collaboration process than it is a mentor, just to like demystify that whole top-down process, which also is a part of like how you show up at the table. There's no one that's at the top or head of. It's a collaborative and group experience in solving a problem, so that I can learn from anybody that's in that space, whether it's individual, like a one-on-one, or if it's in a group setting. That person could be part of my career collaboration experience, or the purpose of what I'm serving for whatever it is I'm wanting to do in my life. So
that's so true. And thank you for kind of illuminating that term, because it's something that you've been kind enough for us to kind of tag team in utilizing. So that's really wonderful. Any other panelists want to share their thoughts on kind of being able to have a seat at the table and what mentorship looks like for you?
I could talk about mentorship.
Yes.
Just in the time that I've been a practicing designer and an academic, I think mentorship has really changed. And so I appreciate that Eugenie brought up the top down. I think even 10 years ago, when students would engage with a mentorship relationship, it was really students were looking up to the mentor, and it wasn't the shared one-to-one, I learn from you, you learn from me, and that there was this active listening, for sure, that there's more of a dialogue than the student asking like for help, right? Like they're asking for help, and it's more of a relationship embedded in the mentorship or career collaborator relationship.
Such a great point. Yeah.
I'm happy to jump into, Eugenie has been sharing this term, it's been a few years now, of creative collaborator, and it's something that I really resonate with so much, and echoing what Precious just said in terms of relationships. For Your Street, Your Voice, like I said, we work with high school age students, and Ayana is in the house here, so wave to her and say hello. She is one of our students. So happy that she is here with us today. So thinking of and really talking about age is not like really demystifying the age part. I think anybody in living on this earth right now is a lived expert in whatever capacity that is. And so the work and the relationships that I hope that we're building with Your Street, Your Voice and at ELSO is that students feel empowered to be whatever space they're in, whatever table they're invited to or not invited to, is they have the confidence that their experiences are equally valued than the person that's sitting at the head. And part of some of the frameworks that we use for school, for our classes, the one that we're really resonating with is the Black Space Manifesto. I'm going to put it in the chat. And this is not the principles in Black Space Manifesto are generationally old, and a lot of them are from Native practices and Indigenous practices. And the first and foremost that we start with is create circles and not lines. We are given this notion of when you are going through a career, you're going through this ladder and you're leveling up and it's linear. And in order to get up, you have to have somebody above you assist you, instead of having an organization of circles. And so another component of that is going at the speed of trust too. So we talk about relationships, and relationships foundationally have to be based on trust. And so especially in Black, Indigenous, Latino communities of color, trust has, in the realm of white supremacy, trust is not there. And so as a professional, me who holds a lot of power and privilege, being the adult in the room, being the person in the room, it has to be flipped on its head in terms of who's being centered in spaces and who's being centered in this relationship. So those are a few thoughts.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so true. I think that actually ties us nicely into our next topic around career challenges, and wondering if we can pose a question about the idea of gatekeeping, which you were just touching on, Jackie, and really how you access and gain access to the resources that you need, the information that you need to really develop in your career. And I would just throw that out, kind of concept out there, and any maybe Precious, if you might want to touch on that a little bit, kind of looking at that false narrative of having to work twice as hard as a BIPOC individual, and that notion of gatekeeping.
Yeah, I can. I'll speak specifically in design education or academia. There are so many requirements, academic requirements. Lived experience is not as valued as an advanced degree. So I find that in the time that I've been a teacher, that the lack of diversity within the folks that are teaching is because of all of these financial, academic barriers. And these barriers they continue because it's perpetuating a system where the folks that are learning from a limited population, and then within the limited population, the BIPOC students of color are not able to see themselves. And then we're just moving that group of students into a work environment that, although it is evolving, it is changing, it is very slow to change. Academics is even slower to change. In the time that I've I've taught, and I've been teaching for 25 years at the college level. I've been the only woman, the only person of color, and at times the youngest faculty member at various institutions across the West Coast. I'm not naming one in particular. I've taught at about 6. So, so when thinking about that, like how can we shift, how can we shift our faculties? And this, like, I think Jackie can speak on this too, like it starts sooner, right? It's starting in kindergarten, it's starting in art classes in middle school, it's starting in the history class, it's not even starting, it's just continuing to perpetuate. So just in terms of my role, I really see myself definitely as an advocate and a bridge between education and industry, and I think there's more and more folks that are working, and Eugenie and Jackie and definitely diversity in design is working in that same space.
That's really valuable insight. Thank you for sharing that. Jackie, did you want to jump in on that at all?
It looked like Eugenie, did you want to share? Oh, okay. I just picked up something. I love, Precious, what you were just saying, being the bridge between education and industry. And I think in design, like without both, like, what are we doing? It seems like, for me, I became an architect, I became a designer because I know the value of the built environment, and it can make or break your quality of life. And the question is, who gets to decide, who makes those decisions? And I think we teach design as decision making in all kinds of realms of whoever designed this pencil or this computer screen that we're looking at, or that awesome Miro board that you have, and who's it working for and who it's not. And so I think constantly, one of the core reasons why we created Your Street, Your Voice and Empower Her was a direct result of industry's lack of representation and lack of having successful spaces for BIPOC communities to thrive in. And so just like what you said, Precious, it starts young. There are a gajillion studies that show by the age of 12, specifically girls, femme, trans, non-binary, of color, drop out of all STEM education in general. And that is from all of the messaging from media, from the systems that we operate in, from school, from teachers, that there's no space in those professions for them. And so this is one small piece of this larger network of systems working with diversity and design, working with Eugenie, and we are here and Gather and Garner, and with Precious and the comma students, is like, if the village of professionals has a responsibility for the next generation to say, despite the white supremacist systems that we're in, we value you. And that's something that, like, is obviously, we're all in this and it's a huge heavy lift, but as an industry, there is responsibility, but there's also like a hell of a lot of leverage and market value that industry brings.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm wondering if we can dig a little bit into kind of that trust piece that you've mentioned a couple of times, Jackie, and also Precious, touching on kind of the experiences that you've had and you've seen through your students' lenses about, like, not necessarily feeling qualified to be sharing their stories or be in a position to give guidance to other individuals because we're all operating in this system where we don't have the representation at leadership levels where we feel like, we're receiving that. So how do we know how to pass it on? So kind of addressing that notion of imposter syndrome and just like building trust. Eugenie, do you or Precious, do you want to join in on that?
I feel like I'm talking too much. I don't know. Eugenie, go.
I will go. There's so many layers with that trust piece, right? And especially if you're in a space where, if you live in an area where you are not in the global majority in that space, right? Building trust and trying to get access to the things you need become a huge barrier. And then if you are in a space where there is like, the percentage is even really low, but there's like persons of color or persons of a major diverse background, you're trying to establish that trust and figure out where they're sitting, especially if you don't know where they're coming from within the system, right? We're all navigating through the system of white supremacy, right? We're all like this working our way to figure out how to survive through that rather than thrive. And so if you're in survival mode, right, it becomes one of those spaces where not only you're navigating all the other factors, but now you're navigating that with your peer who, either may look like you or sits in a similar space of diversity like you, but you're trying to figure out what are the steps to start building that trust in an industry, especially, like an industry like the creative industry, which can sometimes be very cutthroat, right? And it's very male dominant to begin with. If you're a female or if you sit in a female form, like that process within itself is already a challenge. So it really comes down to trying to figure out how to navigate that and come in a space like of trust and knowing that you're building it and knowing that you're partners with each other rather than, I'm going to look out for me, number one, only me, and forget about you. Like that's the only way it's going to really change if we start changing the narrative of how we trust each other. And then on the other end of that is, as we're working, like those who are in the spaces who are working to like bring more diversity to the table, right? Get their industries or the businesses or the work that they do, like bring that level of diversity so that younger folks, because it does start young, if they're not seeing that, they're not going to be willing to come into that and deal with all of that, right? So if we can help that process, like I just think it's a bit more, I don't know, organic. It comes from an organic place, but the person like myself, I have to trust you, the person that's coming in, that, there's a level of understanding that I may not know you, I may not know your intent, but at the very least, I know that I want to uplift you. And I hope that you do the same, whether you treat me that way or not. I hope that our experience at least gets you in another place where you are doing better and treating someone better when they come along. And I feel like that's the part of the collaboration piece that comes about that, where you become the mentor without even knowing, or, that you're that person. Right. So I think we talked about something earlier in a conversation with, not in this room, but in a different conversation, where we talked about getting over that imposter syndrome of I'm not ready to be a mentor, or I can't do that because I don't have that experience. Right. And I think when we start valuing each other's experience, you then realize like, wait a minute, my experience does mean something to someone.
Absolutely. Catherine, I think you had some insight on that too. I don't know if you mind jumping in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I shared this with you guys a couple of days ago, but so at my previous job, I mean, I really liked working out there. But having a different culture and language, just it was really challenging. But the thing is, of course there was a lot of unfairness and like some painful experiences, but the problem was not so much the environments or the experiences or whoever that that sets those kinds of boundaries or like the things, but I think the main problem was just myself accepting that situation, that the negative experiences. So sorry.
No, you're doing great.
Yeah, and my English is not really bad, but I'm trying to say that in the beginning of my career, because language is different, and I have that language and culture barrier. It was really difficult to be part of the group, right? The part of the yes, and part of the group. But then I was accepting the facts that I was thinking that this is something that I just have to live with. This is something that I just have to accept and just just be okay with, right? But joining diversity in design really opened my eyes, because now I know that the things that I was experiencing in the beginning of my career wasn't right. So it really opened my eyes to see what people are like trying to like fix this problem, these issues, and come up with a solution. That's like really amazing to me. So yes.
Yes, no, thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate you. That's a really helpful segue as well into our third topic. So changing the narrative. I'd love to hear input from our panelists and our community members on the call today. So if feel free, folks, if you want to join in or ask questions, definitely want to give some space for that as well. Just posing the question around building confidence, like Catherine was just speaking to, and not allowing that validation to feel like we're in the wrong, or that those experiences are not valid, and really trying to change that narrative and support each other in not having to struggle to gain career experience, but to reach out and connect with our advocates and partners. What could that look like? How would we go about doing that, building confidence and advocating for each other? And I'm happy to throw that out to the audience as well.
Well, I'll start part of that, and then I'll pass it on to someone in the audience. I think, like, it doesn't have to be something big. It could be something as small as, a coworker is learning a program that they're not very familiar with, and you have a bit of expertise in that. And we all do it sometimes. I don't know how to do this thing, or I'm not really good. One part of that narrative is I'm not really good at that, or I'm not good at that. I'm right. So, and part of changing that narrative is no one's expecting you to be an expert at it, but you're learning that. I'm learning how to use that. I'm learning how to be better at that, rather than already giving yourself like, I'm no good at that. And I like to encourage the folks that I work with, and especially in our community, that narrative of you immediately talk yourself out of it as soon as you walk in the space. And especially if you walk in a space where, again, you're the only person of color, or you're the only person, sitting in LGBTQIA space, right? Or trans, like, it just automatically, I'm not good at that. I don't know how to, I'm so bad at that, right? Rather than I'm learning how to do this, I'm gonna get better to do that. And if we encourage each other when we hear each other say those things, I think that little small section is like the building of confidence, the building of the thing, the support, part of the support system. So it doesn't have to be this grand sort of thing. It literally could be something just that small, by being like, you got this, or hey, you are learning this, so don't worry about it. We're all learning in this situation, right? Even if I am the expert, I'm still learning something new, right? So
That's awesome. Yeah, I really like that notion. Just reframing things in more of a positive direction is so powerful.
and it's not denying or not acknowledging that you're not in that, right? Like, I want to acknowledge that you are having frustration with this tool or this concept or this engagement with someone, but just building their confidence that there's a solution and that you can do it. Like you're gonna get better at it each time it happens.
I think I said this a couple of days ago with the team here, but another thing is that educating the firms and the people with power is like very important. So I mean, we as a BIPOC group, we acknowledge the issue. We understand what what's needed to be done to make this better. But the challenging part is the leaders in the design community who need to understand what needs to be done to just have more to give more opportunities to those people, the BIPOC professionals, and then support the community. So.
Yeah, I want to ask a question to everybody, and feel free to put it in the chat. Like, who feels like if you work in a firm or in a predominantly white organization or dominant culture organization, who feels like that they have an advocate in a decision-making role? Well, eagerly wait for responses, because for me, when I've worked in, God, at least probably like 8 different architecture firms across the country, and it was very few and far between where I felt that there was an advocate in a leadership role. So a lot of the advocacy that I seeked out, especially when I first started, was with my peers and outside the firm and outside the industries. And so because of that existing condition, like clearly that's not how we're going to have significant movement and traction for liberation, especially in design industry. So where our humanity is seen first before our bottom line. But finding advocates, like seriously, diversity in design has been such an amazing group, like that consistently comes together to support each other. And other organizations, the organizations part of Camp ELSO, like there are so many other places in the city that it's outside like the place of work, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd be curious that if anyone in this room, any of the participants in this room have any, ideas or possible like solutions that they've encountered in dealing with like being a support in that space.
I could talk about some of the things that I talk about with my students. One thing that we've spent a lot of time with is asking for help. And this kind of follows what Eugenie was saying, that, I need help with this program or this skill. I'm not an expert. So you might have those feelings like, I need help. And I know within the student space, having the confidence to ask is a barrier in itself because of the the perception of having to always be perfect. So we work to, I don't know if it's develop skills, but just have conversations, like really honest conversations about what it means to ask and how to actively do it. So, and that's specifically with my college students.
That's awesome. Are they pretty receptive to that, or is it tough? Because I imagine it might be hard to kind of unlearn that, you know, frame of reference.
Oh yeah, it's tough. You know, I still have a hard time asking for help. I think even just acknowledging that you need it is like this first step when you're stuck. Like that just feels like an accomplishment sometimes when you're working on a project for a really long time and you don't even know. And sometimes I've been in positions where I didn't even know what to say, like because I was under the impression that if I even asked, that I would be perceived as less of a professional, you know, at a leadership level, when that's a bunch of bullshit. You know, especially when I see my peers asking all the time. So learning how to reach out, and understanding that there's a network somewhere, right? And this is a part, this is a part of building the network, but there's a network, and that taking that first jump, to reach out is really important. And it's a big accomplishment.
That's super cool.
And I think it's important to like not feel like you're, I mean, when you're in school, the stakes are different, right? When you're in a learning environment. So therefore, the safety, I mean, it still comes from that place, right? Where we have to like educate ourselves to be like, it's okay to ask. And then when you get into like studio spaces or working environments where you have in your mind, or you're telling yourself part of the story, and in some cases it's not a story, it's part of the culture, where your job is on the line, right? If you are expected to know this thing and you don't know it, so therefore, again, we're back in that loop of professional development. We're back in that loop of how does somebody become your career collaborator rather than someone that's like trying to stomp you out or feeling threatened, right? That especially if you're in a leadership position, that your job is on the line. You're threatened by like, if this person ends up knowing all this knowledge, if I give them all this information, they're going to take my job, rather than like, I want you to know what I know. I want you to be able to do that so I can move on and elevate into these other spaces I'm looking forward to doing. And what's wrong with, having yourself replaced out of a job so that you could do something else, right? But we get stuck in this. And again, it's part of dominant culture. You get stuck in that, like, I got to hang on to that. So therefore, I'm not going to ask. I'm going to hold all of this information and hoard it to myself and not share it, or share it only if it benefits me in that situation, right? Rather than how can I help my peer learn? And especially if you're a person of color, again, and you're like, there aren't as many of you, and you're like trying to, that ladder you mentioned earlier, Jackie, like, what ladder? Like, if we're all here to solve some problems and do all these things, right? And in humanity, then what ladder are we actually talking about here? That ladder should not exist, right? I should be ever so grateful to pass on my knowledge and to elevate into other spaces. Like, yeah.
Min, you put in the chat about how do we create and really start that dialogue. Do you want to expand on that a little more for the panelists?
Oh, absolutely. I totally jive with everything that everyone's been saying. Number one, thank you for this group, because that is one thing I've always struggled through my whole career. I've always had to figure out things on my own, and I've never realized there's this support group. And I've always kind of been, I guess some people would call it bulldozing my pathway, because I can't find a resource. I didn't know who to go to. So I just kind of developed my own thing. And I've definitely learned a lot. And I've always had this idea of like, oh my God, I have all this knowledge, but how do I share it so that I can help empower the next person, so then they can feel comfortable elevating themselves or getting the skills that they needed. So kind of going back to what Eugenie was talking about, which I totally connected, that whole idea of like sharing and being able to kind of put it out there. Like, because I know sometimes when we get stuck with like, who do I go to? So then it's sometimes like it's the other opposite. I'm not saying I'm an expert or anything, but I have some sort of unique perspective or knowledge that I do want to share, but I just don't know how do I put it out there so that other people who do need it, they can get in touch with me and get the help that they need or deserve so that they can elevate themselves.
Well, we're starting a mentorship program, so if you would like to participate in that, that's
I would be down to that, because I've mentored a couple students through the career. I've always kind of educate them in terms of like sharing my life pathways of like, hey, when you negotiate salary, don't take the first figure. Always counter, always never feel like just because they gave you that opportunity, you're a student, never feel like, oh, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, I should just get whatever the first offer is. So I always kind of educate them, there's a reason why they're talking to you. You have value, you have something that you can bring to the table. So don't undersell yourself. Always put it in a way where you can counter, not necessarily in like saying, I need more money, but it's more like, I was wondering if you would consider this. So I always kind of talk them through that process and also explain to them other pathways, because interior design, you can go many different avenues. I've done from interior designer to working for corporate facilities at Nike, to working for a Knoll dealership, to now I'm being a furniture sales rep. So I've wore many different hats. And I feel like some people think when they have a perception of one particular pathway, they're stuck on that particular pathway because everyone's been doing it. So it's okay to break out of the mold and just say, you know what, I've tried it. That's not my thing. It's okay to say, I want to try something different and explore. And sometimes whatever that different route, it actually ends up being better in the long run.
Such a good point. Thank you.
I think Catherine talked about that earlier, and we, in a different room conversation we were having, and you bring up some good point. Maine, right? Maine?
Yes.
Maine. The few points that you brought up in there and on a conversation we all had as collaborators was, you might enter a space where, you're in school and you take the job as like the receptionist or something else. And even though, what you really want is that design job or something else within that space, you have to be given the space or figure out way, like, again, that's that narrative, changing the narrative of like, just because I hire you to be in this area, I need to also be able to give you the space to move about, right? And get to the space that you want to be in, rather than stigmatizing you or shaming you and your peers shaming you, like, you have a receptionist job? I thought you were like this thing. Well, you're trying to pay your bills. So of course you're going to take this receptionist job at the place you really want to be at, but you might end up moving around in there. And you have to, I think support needs to be around that if that's your starting space, rather than, you're a lot of folks in school do kind of come out of the gate thinking, I'm going to have that design job, I'm going to have this other job first. I'm like, you may not get exactly that writing gig or that thing initially at the beginning. It might look like something different. It's not going to be a linear path to get there, because I know I didn't end up in the seat that I'm in because it was linear. It was definitely some very interesting, turns of events that have gotten me into the place I'm in right now. So.
Absolutely. And I feel like, what's really interesting is talking to you guys, I appreciate the whole panel. It's like everyone's so passionate. And I think that's one thing that they don't really teach in school, or even for people of color, is that if you show your passion, even if you start out as a receptionist, you better be one hell of a receptionist, like be a super kick-ass, where they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize you had these other skill sets. And they're like, oh man, I could see you doing this. So I think that's what it is. Even if it's a stepping stone, whether if it's a receptionist or marketing role or whatever it is, it may not be your first choice. Just be one super hell of a, like, do the best job you can, and that you believe in it, and just give like your whole heart and soul. That's one thing I've always wanted to kind of share, is like, I've always felt I always get positive outcome when I give it my all, like whether if it's burning the midnight oil sometimes and just kind of really plow through it. But at the end, the result, the employer or your boss, they'll actually see potential. Then you kind of almost create your own space to help elevate yourself to the next role. I don't know if it's the same for you guys.
Do we have any questions from our students who are guests? I know a lot of the questions were specifically or kind of talking about the workplace, but maybe if there are questions about like how do you actually get into the workplace and what are some other situations maybe that you have questions about, anyone?
I have a question regarding what Min was just sharing. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good way to prove yourself. Just wherever you are or what position you're in, like just to do your best, and then show yourself that you're capable of doing whatever. But I'm also worried that I mean, I want to ask the professionals in this chat, like, have you, because you're a person of color, and because in whatever reason, like for me, it would be the language and the culture, but because of your lack of some things, like, do you feel like you have to even like try more than the other people, like the people around you? Like, do you sometimes feel like you have to sacrifice like your life or your family, your kids to get there? I mean, I think we have to be really careful of setting that boundary, like what's working hard enough to prove yourself. So that could be yeah, good for your career, but if on the other hand, it could be very unhealthy too.
Jamal, I don't know if you mind joining in the conversation. I see you made notes in the chat. Yeah, I'd love to invite you in.
Sure. I guess, bouncing off of what Catherine's saying, I think starting out, like, I've been working in digital design for probably about 20 years now. And I think that my hardest working time was probably like in school. So like during my educational phase through college, was constantly trying to teach myself things, learn things, and network with people, like even people who I would consider future competitors, because sometimes other people have knowledge that I don't have. And I definitely didn't have any of the knowledge or any connections and stuff. And it was kind of through that kind of networking that I was able to kind of branch out. As far as like the working harder aspect of things, I've always been raised with that, oh, you're gonna have to work 2 or 3 times harder than the next person to get that job or that opportunity. So it's always kind of been in my head to just be studying ahead for classes and doing extracurricular, design work and design studies, basically doing more to get to where I want to be, realizing that, you can, get through the courses in school and, like in a design school or college and just get your degree, but ultimately not be prepared for the way the design agencies are going to be, or different places you might work. You know, it's just like, as soon as you get into those places, you're learning all over again. You have to learn how that place operates, how the culture is within that place, and navigating all the potential drama, or just like how to get your answers. And I've always been the kind of person who's asked all the stupid questions over and over until I got it stuck in my head. And you know, a lot of times I felt like I'm annoying, or someone's going to just like stop giving me answers. But yeah, I think you'd be surprised at how much people want to share their knowledge, regardless of their background or even race. You know, often I would go to, you know, the person of color within the place I'm working to kind of get some information, like, hey, you're, you know, closest to me, like this, you know, what was your experience coming up? And, you know, I always try to seek out those people if they existed within a company. That wasn't always the case earlier in my career. But nowadays there's more people, but yeah, it's, again, back to working. It's like, I've always been working harder and longer and late hours and things like that, which isn't healthy. And I think I'm starting to find a better balance of that in my later years. But it just always felt like there's always going to be competition, and it's always growing, and that you just have to, if you're passionate about something, keep doing more work, because it can only help you. So I don't know if that was any help.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I'm here mainly to listen and you know, get people's thoughts about how they, you know, want to be helped, because I feel like I've always wanted to help younger people trying to get into this field, or you know, get through doors and like answer any questions I think, you know, that can help them grow their confidence, because I think it is a tough thing coming right out of school and into the professional world. There's like no classes at design school or colleges that teach you how it's like to be in a design company or agency or advertising place or whatever. So yeah, just, I feel like networking and things like this especially are great for breaking the ice, meeting professionals, and, you know, having kind of like back and forth conversations and asking all those annoying questions over and over until you get, you know, something that kind of clicks the light bulb in your head as to where you want to go and what you want to do. And yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'd like to kind of chime in on some of that, where I don't think no question's an annoying question, because again, that's changing the narrative. Even the word networking, how like we go, you say that and you're like, you know, a student or you're like, ew, network was something, rather than you're just curious. You're meeting people, meeting other people. Like, I think like if we come in like rephrasing that icky word of like networking into like, I'm actually curious. I'm actually in that state of like wanting to know, what is it that you do, or why do you like what you do? Or the vice versa. How can I help you do what you do, right? What does that look like for you? Like, what are your visions? What are you looking for? Like, for better or worse, right? Because some people do that, you know, intention is another piece, right? But sometimes you never know if that conversation you're having with someone helps set their intention in a different direction. So I think if we can like professional folks in the professional setting, right? And then there's also the professional, again, for me, sometimes when I think of that, that's hierarchical. You're a professional. And I remember in my own college experience, one of my professors, and I went to school for theater. So one of my professors was like, if you did this thing and they paid you $1 for it, you're a professional. You just got paid. Like, you just earned money. And I was like, I never even, you know, I just remember having that moment of like, they're right. Because if we're saying the value of $1 means that my skill set is worth something, then I guess I did just earn that, right? Like the lemonade stand. You just like learned your first thing of business. So I think if we can, you know, and that's starting way younger, right? If you're already learning about lemonade stand, and then the word competition, like scarcity, that's like a scarcity model. This is not my competitor. There's plenty of need. Like I do what I do, but there should be more of what I do. And there are more, you know, I can't do everything, and we are here and catch everybody. That's why, you know, Your Street, Your Voice exists. That's why diversity in design exists. That's why all of these places exist and initiatives exist in these other places, because we can't cover it all. We can only cover where we are and the spaces that we're in and that we've moved through. So if I'm able to like do what I can and catch what I can, then have that person, you know, I'm like, hey, I caught this. I hope that you pass it on wherever you go to continue this work. You're not my competitor. By God, I want you to be doing like as many clear collaborator programs as you can, like, because I can't be everywhere. Like, that's just, you know, and there's always going to be somebody, and there's always going to be like in the world of creativity, right? As designers, as architects, as creators, we're here to like solve problems, and everybody has unique like situations and problems, right? Nobody's plumbing issue is quite the same issue, but we have plumbers, right? And they exist and they come over and fix the thing. So
yeah, I agree. And I think like there was a comment earlier about like collaborators versus competitor. And I think that people who are your competitors can totally be your collaborators as well. Like I found like connecting with other like-minded creatives or people interested in the same thing, you can really kind of pool information and resources, and like maybe you find a job that's like perfect for your friend who's kind of in a similar thing, but you know, this is maybe more their thing. And you know, and that person could in turn like recommend you to some other place, you know, to get you a job because they're busy someplace else. So I really think that like, you know, one person can't do every design job out there. You know, there's so many, you know, positions usually out there that it's hard to think of it, because you might have a tough time finding your way into one place. But as soon as you get in that door, even people in those places know, you know, other managers at other companies who are looking for people just like you, or, okay, we don't have something for you, but this other place is doing an internship, or, you know, something like that. And it's like, you know, I just can't stress enough the networking aspect of things, just because it's, as a creative person, I think I feel like a lot of creative people can tend to be introverted, and it already is like a blockade on your career progress, because you haven't gotten the practice of talking to people, and, you know, even just like walking up to a stranger and be like, hi, you know, this is me, this is what I like to do, here's my card, can I get your card? And it's like, as corny as that feels, and, you know, I don't even know if we even do that much anymore. I think more people are online these days, you know, obviously, especially because of the pandemic. But before, in the past, it seemed like a way back in the day, there was more meeting at bars or at certain clubs for people who, you know, couldn't go to bars, you know, so people could just mingle and kind of, you know, just talk to just people on a person-to-person basis, and then discover what they do organically, you know, rather than just going on LinkedIn and finding somebody who does something specific and try to bug them. And, you know, it's just easier in person. And I think that's why when you have groups like this, and at least face-to-face Zoom in person, I think is a great way to just, you know, people can see right away, oh, that person can communicate. They can talk to other people. They can, you know, describe what they're, you know, looking for, or how to, you know, what they're trying to create. And it's such a big aspect of, you know, working in the creative profession, is just being able to talk to other people. So,
and I don't think talking is like the only way. You know, I work in my day gig, I do a lot of communications things, and my background is theater, so that's a lot of
theater helps.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to be. I think to acknowledge that, again, people they're different, right? We all have different little things, even though we're the same in some aspects, but there's a lot of little differences. So even if you're an introvert could look so different in different levels, right? So, you know, I don't expect everyone to do what I do, or turn it on when they need to turn it on. Like, hey, if communicating, you know, writing is your thing, yeah, texting, I'm seeing that comment, writing, yeah, if that's your thing, then own it. It's really about owning it. Like, if you're gonna quote unquote network, and owning networking, like what that definition, what that looks like for you, own it. If it means to reach out via email to your favorite artist, because I've done a lot of that in my background working with creatives and artists and illustrators and things. It's like, if you see someone you admire in digital space and you haven't met them in person, or you don't like going to like person to person type of style gatherings, then, and you know, that's another word for networking. If you don't want to be at this gathering, then email that person, strike up a conversation. And yeah, they may not like contact you right away, but give it space, you know, and like do it again and say, you know, remind them like you're still here and you would love to have that, you know, 5-minute email, or, you know, read my 2-minute like sentence to say, I really admire what you're doing. Anything you could offer would be great. Like, and opening, I think that's, as people who are sitting in their expertise, when we open up the floor for folks to be able to like let them in, and even if it's us doing the initiation, I think that's helpful. And it breaks down the barriers to be like, I'm just like you. I have fears just like you. You know, I struggle with things just like you. I didn't get here overnight, right? I've reminding folks, like, it's a constant reminder, I didn't get here overnight. It's taken me 20 something years to get to this seat. It didn't happen overnight. And yeah, maybe I had luck or these other things that have come my way. But again, it wasn't like some like easy peasy thing that just like, and there I am, you know? Like, if we can demystify a lot of these processes, that's why I think career collaboration is so important, is demystifying our process, right? Opening the floor and opening the doors, or having the seats at the table. And even when the seats are like mostly a dominant culture, like showing up, right? And being brave to do that. I saw a question about resilience, the narrative around resilient and authentic narrative around ourselves, right? I was like reading parts of this, like that's all a part of changing the narrative. Even just showing up helps change the narrative. And if showing up is, again, like your form of communication that works best for you, own it.
I just want to add to that, Eugenie. It's just amazing what you were saying about the whole owning it, because that's so critical. And one of the things, part of like, for me, that I find effective about changing the narrative is, don't be afraid of the word informational interview, because that's kind of part of networking. But information interview, it's really about learning about the position or learning about the company, because sometimes I find a lot of firms, when they post a certain job description, they say, we're looking for this, you need to have this many years of experience. But then when I actually interview, even though I may know I only probably qualify 30% of it, but what happens is part of that organic of the storytelling, because they'll want to get to know you, you get to know the company, then they realize, oh my gosh, there's chemistry. We actually think there's a position for you here. It may not be this that you're applying for, it's actually this other one. Would you be interested? So I think it's part of that opening that dialogue again, that storytelling is opening yourself up. And in order to do that, you really, I know it's hard, I struggle too, is to push your ego aside about the whole, I'm not good enough, or, you know, I don't have enough experience. Just pushing that ego aside and just kind of go for it and owning it, and just kind of let it be and see what happens. And sometimes if you fall on your face, you learn a lesson. You're like, okay, I won't do that again, you know, so it's okay.
Those are awesome perspectives. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm wondering if other folks might want to touch on, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Araceli's question around authenticity and resilience, or if they would like to talk a little bit more about that as well.
I think this is a really powerful question, and I think it's something that I'm processing a lot, especially with the multiple spaces that I find myself in terms of, and especially workspaces, because there's a layer of necessity in the sense, and self-inflicted necessity, because my place of work pays my bills, keeps the roof over my head, puts food on my table. And if there's a sense of risk in terms of if I'm It's kind of hard for me to think about this theoretically. I'm thinking of this at like a specific situation where if there is a conflict of interest from an organization side, whether something is unethical or if somebody's trying to put me in a box or represent something that I'm not, or I'm curious, is there a specific situation that you're tackling with on this?
Hi, it's mostly, I've just been thinking about this question about what does a state of compromise mean and what does a state of survival mean and what are the implications as my lived experience. I go to school that's predominantly white within a college of business, and that in itself is like, you know, I'm in danger when I enter those spaces. So just understanding the ways in which I unconsciously compromise to survive in those instances, and then reflecting on the ways in which I've compromised and like, how do I not do that again? And how to identify to, like, I pretty much, how to identify that and how do I overcome that instinct to compromise, not instinct, but like, because that has been my lived experience, it almost becomes an instinct. So that's kind of the context.
Thank you for sharing that. Eugenie, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is from my own lived experience. I'll share a little bit of that, and coming to a place that what you're talking about, starting a business at the age of like 21 in college, in those spaces, and then having that narrative, especially you're talking business school. I did not go to business school, but I knew, like, just from corporate spaces, there were things I didn't want to do. There were things that starting my own, jumping and taking a leap. So that's the first thing, is like, when you're taking the leap, you're already like doing something pretty like out of your comfort zone that requires a level of resilience. And then even the thought that you're even having right there is another like level of that resilience that you're starting to build. Ways that you can recognize that, because I did a lot of things along the way because I thought that's how you were supposed to do it. Like, I thought that's how you're supposed to run your business and do it this way. And there was lots of struggles against, like, I mean, I struggle even now with the system of nonprofit versus like profit versus like that whole narrative. It's still, it makes me feel like, you know, I don't even have a word for it. Just it disturbs me because it's based on a system that isn't equitable. It's based on a system that doesn't really care about me right now. Like, it's capitalism. It's like all the things, and there's layers, right? And so I'm constantly thinking about that and how I show up, and you're already doing the thing that feels natural to you. You're asking those questions, like. And yes, when you walk into those spaces and you're trying to show up as your authentic self, right, against that, even just asking someone else the question and you could state it in that way. Like, sometimes I'm in a space that's constantly, you know, and this is the day gig that is from dominant culture that does these things. And when I don't feel like something's right, then I just kind of ask the question, why are we doing this? If they're talking about equity, if they're talking about all this change, and I just like, well, why are we doing this? Because it sounds like to me you're doing the same narrative, you're not changing. So that's how I find comfort in a space where I'm not comfortable. And it doesn't, because I still struggle with like, how are these things going to change? When are they, you know, and I still have to navigate through that. Like, so, but asking yourself question and watching, as soon as you recognize that is happening, because it's easy to fall in, because we're taught to do from school. We're just taught to do this thing. You don't question, you don't do this. And I'm not saying that every educator is doing this. I've met some really amazing educators who go against the grain or go against the thing, and they run the risk of losing their jobs or having a certain reputation or whatnot. But I'm thankful for them for even planting any seed in anybody to be able to do that for themselves, like in the spaces that they're working in. So, and when you recognize the part, it's hard because sometimes you fall into it unconsciously, and the moment you realize you do that, when you reflect back, then you can start seeing, oh, okay, I did that thing. I won't do that again. That's coming from this place. This is how I'm going to change that. This is how I'm going to do better the next time. And don't feel shame about it. Again, and that's the other thing, we shame each other. So there shouldn't be shame about that, because you're in a learning space and you're learning to do better, you know, like shame on the other person if you do it again. Like, you know how there's like shame on me once and then shame on me twice. It's like that kind of thing, because if something, the outcome doesn't happen the way you want, and you, after you recognize it, then it's already shame on you. You need to shame yourself. But when you don't know, like, you just don't know, and there's no shame in knowing, and being in that space is part of the learning growth experience.
Yeah, I just want to echo I know we're wrapping up on time, so feel free to cut me off. But I think one of the big things, the fact that you're already asking questions, it's very clear that you're a critical thinker and you're trusting yourself and your own intuition. And what's being in a learning space, you are expected to be critically thinking. And so when I'm in a situation where I feel like my default is questioning myself, not trusting myself, I take time to be in a space where I do feel safe, where I do feel like I have agency and power and joy, and imagine, what do I want to get out of the experience that I'm struggling with? And so having an intention in mind of what you want to get out of school, of what you want to get out of that class, of what you want to get, like, how is this like hard and like oppressive experience that you're having, that you're going to be having for a while until you graduate? How can you reclaim that back to your ultimate goal? And this is a lifelong process. This is not something that's like, oh, I figured out what I want to do in my life. Like, this is an ongoing thing and an ongoing goal in every space that you're in. But when you're in survivor mode, like all of us have experienced, you can't even imagine. You just need to be escape, fight, flight, or freeze. So I encourage you to be in a space where you feel joy, where you feel safe, to unlock your imagination.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you for that really, really great question to end on. I think we're all reflecting on it in our own experience, right? We're at time. I'm so grateful that you joined us, and I hope to see you again. So this was a preview of our event that will be a full event in May, on May 20th at 5:30. If you signed up for our emails or are connected to us through any of our newsletters or anything, then you'll get more information. But we'll also be sharing out this the link to this recording, and then also another link to the Miro board if you want to take some time to review the comments and maybe add some reflections on there. We'd appreciate that. And other than that, thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.